Well, hello and welcome to this edition of Under the Umbrella. I'm WDTN Plus meteorologist Melissa Barrington. I'm really excited to do this show today. I've been really wanting to do this one for quite a while, and I specifically waited until January because at the end of this episode, we're going to show you an arts and crafts project that you may want to do, and it's best to start at the beginning of the year, especially if you want to do this year versus another year. So what we're going to be talking about is weather data and where you can find it, and that's what we're going to focus on the first half of this episode. The second half, we're going to, like I said, do an arts and crafts basically project. It's not for everybody, but kids can still get involved in this particular arts and crafts project that I have in mind. So first thing we're going to talk about is where we get our weather data. So a lot of times folks will see Brian Davis, he'll put up the weather almanac for the day and it tells you the high, the low, the record high, the record low, sunrise, sunset, that information for the day. One thing to keep in mind though, is when you see that at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, that is not the final weather data for the day. So a lot of times we'll get calls on that and it goes midnight to midnight. So we don't actually have the weather data or the almanac information completed until the next day. And it comes out at 12:35 roughly in the morning the next day. And in the summertime when we have daylight saving time, it actually comes out at 1:35 in the morning. So that's something to keep in mind if you're a person that does keep track of the weather data at home, if you're tracking the high or the low, because a lot of times we'll get the high or the low temperature at midnight, or we're still tracking precipitation as well. So it's just FYI information. So now, if you want to look it up yourself and try to find it, where do we go? Well, we're going to spend some time today on some websites. So let's pull up the first one. Matt is going to be helping me out here. He's my director. And this is the first website that we're going to spend most of our time on. This is weather.gov, just as it sounds, weather.gov. And this is the National Weather Service. And as you can see here, we get a map. We see the entire U.S. here. And basically, if you click on any location, Matt, just pick a place, doesn't matter where, and you'll get a National Weather Service office. So by clicking here in Northeast Ohio, we got Cleveland. So this is the office area for the Cleveland area. And when you look at this map, one thing that if you click anywhere on the United States, these maps will vary by office. So if we're going to look up weather data for Cleveland, for example, if we go to climate and past weather, click on that tab. Yep, you get all kinds of different stuff. Now, this is the end goal. This is what we want to see is what's called now data, but you will not necessarily find it under that tab on every single National Weather Service office. So this is what we want to end up with. But let's go back and find a different location where we can find this universally across the entire U.S. So if we go back to the homepage, weather.gov, we're going to scroll up to the top, and then we're going to click on past weather, which is at the very top. It says home, forecast, past weather. And then you're going to click on past weather. Now we scroll back down, and we're going to get another picture of all of the National Weather Service offices across the entire country. Now we're on the same platform, office to office. Does not matter where you are going to click. So we're going to click on any city, any National Weather Service office. And now we pull up here, we've got stuff from Louisville, Kentucky. And now this is the page that we want to get to, which is called the Now data. Now, when you look at this particular page, you'll notice that it starts out with Lexington area, Louisville, and then it goes into specific cities. There's also, if you click on View Map right above the cities, it'll also give you these pinpoints of where you could potentially get that climate data from. So you have a couple different options of figuring out how to get to that data. So if we go back, give us just a second. You can go to Wilmington if you'd like to. Then folks can see what Wilmington's look like. Okay, so you can click on Columbus area, Cincinnati area, Dayton, or if you want, you can scroll down here and you can pick any city. Let's go ahead and just use Dayton as the example. And we want Dayton International Area. So International Airport. So we scroll down to Dayton. And if by some chance you find a location where the data doesn't come up with anything, you want to always find the closest airport to the location that you're looking for. So we're going to look at Dayton, and then we're going to go ahead and use this past December because that's the date, and we're going to hit go. There we go. So now we have all of the information that happened in Dayton, Ohio for the last month. Notice we had a record high that read 68 back on December 28th. And then we also had two record lows that were on December 14th and 15th, highlighted in the blue with the -2s. So again, you can go back and look at this information. And also, like when it comes to precipitation, they'll probably mark where it is with a different color or maybe even an asterisk for showing that it was a record for the day. So if we hit the X on that particular one, and let's go ahead and look at another, and we're looking at data for a month. You can also look at it daily. So if you go back and click Daily Almanac right there, leave it on Dayton, click that, and then it's going to give us, let's change it to earlier in the month of January. So pick the 1st, the new year. Let's go ahead and hit go. And now all of a sudden we can actually see what the weather data was for that particular month or for that particular day. So a lot of folks may be looking for this information. A lot of kids need this information for like science fair projects and just lots of different projects as well. And you may need it too. So let's click on the X again. And one thing that folks, if you ever need weather data for something that's legal, go under the FAQs here. Click on the FAQ, right above where it says weather data, FAQ. Right there. There we go. There we go. Okay, so if you ever need weather data for anything that is legal, you cannot use what I'm showing you. You can get an idea, but you do have to actually go to the National Center for Environmental Information and actually get the official data. But if you go under the FAQs, we scroll down, there's lots of different information here. It tells you, like, there's the red highlighted temperature. That means it's a maximum record high. There's all kinds of information to look for on this. So definitely something that folks may be interested in. And you can do this for any city in the country. Okay, so let's close this out. Okay, so we are back to looking at Wilmington. So we are going to also talk about how to use this for a project. So I wanted to do something called a temperature quilt. So a temperature quilt was actually started back during the pandemic around 2020. And what happened is folks were bored at home, and there were moms that had fabric at home, and so what they decided to do was create something called a temperature quilt. So by doing so, what they did is that almanac that I was saying, like when you watch in the evening and you saw Brian, they would see like what the high was and what the low was. And so every single day they were recording what the high and the low was. And by using the high and the low, then they were color coding it. And then they were making basically a quilt of what the weather was for the entire year. So I took that, I looked at that information, and I was like, okay, well, I want to change that, and I wanted to use it as a birth year. So, for example, like if you have a graduating senior, for example, for like this year, let's go back and let's pick the Dayton area, and then let's change the date then to 2008, because that would be our graduating seniors for this year. So let's change the year, and then let's go back to January. Very good, and then hit go. And so now what we can do, if you have that graduating senior, for example, is we can look at what the weather was the entire year for 2008. So basically, if you wanted to use this weather data, you pull up January of 2008, you hit print, and then you're going to print that off. And then what's going to end up happening is that you're going to end up with, this is my little book that I used for my temperature data. And basically, I just started with January, and I went all the way through February, March, all the way through. And one other tip is that if you have a color printer, you do want to use that with this so that you can actually see. It's kind of hard probably for you to see that, but you can see where the record highs and the record lows are. See that red, like there's a 59 in red here. And then I went through and I put asterisks like where the records were. So you do want to use a color printer, and then you have like your book of all your climate data. So then to do the quilt, what you want to do is you want to start by trying to figure out your warmest high temperature and your coldest low temperature. So you probably are going to find your coldest temperature, of course, in like January or February, and your warmest High is probably going to be July, August, or September. And it also depends where you pick. The beauty of doing versus how they did it in 2020, where you're just doing your location, the beauty of doing past weather is that you can pick any place in the country and you can go back and figure that out. So, and the way that the temperature quilt is going to turn out is going to be based, on that location. So when you have your information here, you go through, you plan this out. And the other thing about doing a past years, you can also figure out your fabric. So you know exactly how much of each color that you're going to need. Whereas folks that did it during the pandemic, they didn't know how much fabric they were going to need. So then they were trying to reorder fabric. And of course, everybody then was making masks. So it was difficult to get lots of different fabric swatches for that particular thing. So once you have all your climate data, then I took another piece of paper here. And this one here, I broke down by month, and then I broke it down by temperatures. So I broke it down by 5 degrees. So we have 85 to 89. This is Dubuque, Iowa. Then 80 to 84, 75 to 79. And then I did a tally of all of my temperatures for the entire year. And so then at the end of my sheet here, then I knew exactly over all 12 months how many pieces or squares I was going to use for each color. So I was able to figure that out before I even started the quilt. There's a lot more to go on here, and we'll tell you more about it. We'll be right back, and I'll give you more information. Plus, you'll get to see the quilt, too. We'll be right back. Well, hello and welcome back to Under the Umbrella. This is the second half of this episode, and it's kind of a show and tell part on my part here for this. So this is my temperature quilt behind me. This is not my original design. I did find this particular quilt pattern on the internet. We can pull up the website for it. It was by Canuck Quilter Designs, and this is a free temperature quilt pattern that you can get. All you have to do is send them your email, and they'll email you the quilt design. But you can see here how she has it laid out with multiple colors and then the color range. I will say that coming up with your color range and coming up with the palette is actually one of the more difficult things, because if you look this up on Pinterest, you'll see all different kinds of designs, lots of beautiful things out there. I decided to start with something simple. I'm just like an intermediate quilter. I'm not telling you how to quilt, that's for sure. I'm not telling you how to do your designs. I'm just giving you an example and food for thought, basically, and where to find the weather data. So that was in the first half of the show. Once you have your data, so I'm working off of using past weather data. So once you have it, and if you tally it up like how I did here, then I know, like for 90 degrees plus, for example, at the higher ends, I don't need very much fabric. I only need 4 pieces. And in this particular pattern, the squares are only 2 inches. And then I labeled the squares, like, so this particular color of green is 55 to 59 degrees. And then I have like 25 to 29, and I needed 52 of those. And so I was able to calculate exactly how many of each particular one I needed. And I found that, of course, these higher, the more extremes, a bit hot or cold, you're going to maybe use a fat quarter or less. And then when you get into your middle range numbers, your 40s, 50s, 60s, you're probably going to use close to a yard. So just kind of plan that out. And I have here even, once you figure out like what colors you want to use, you have to find a color pattern that has lots of colors. So I've done this quilt twice. And the first one, I needed 23 colors. And you can see it right here. This is my color range that I added to the quilt. And I have 23 different colors. This particular pattern is Mode Grunge, is what this was. I will say, though, I had to get my colors from 3 different stores. So when I did my fabric swatches, I not only marked the color of what it was, but I also put the temperature range on it, and then I also put initials for what store I got it from, because it's not all universal. Another good place to start is with something with Robert Kaufman, the Kona colors, and I did substitute solids in some locations for like one of my quilts, because like I said, I've done this twice. So some of them do have solid in them. And some folks don't like the change in the color of the Moda Grunge because it can vary, and depending on what your colors are, some folks do not like that. I've talked to several quilters about that. The other thing that I did with this particular quilt is not only just the high and the low temperature, but I also added in record highs and record lows. So when you look at this quilt, each two sets of blocks basically is the day. So I have my other quilt right here, and I'm going to hold it up. So for this particular one, the very top corner, this is January 1st with the high and the low. This is January 2nd with the high and the low, and it goes all the way through to the 31 days. So on this back one here, it's basically going all the way through the entire month. Then, in addition, because I'm a meteorologist, I got to do something else with it. I added record highs and record lows. So the record highs were done, I used basically a red polka dot pattern, and I just put a triangle in the corner for the high. And then for the low, I used a blue polka dot. I used a navy blue. So then I have a little polka dot there. So then what was really interesting, I did this twice. Like I said, I did 2 years, and basically every single month for the years that I did these, there was actually a record high or a record low in all but 1 month. So that was pretty interesting. So basically then you have the weather for the entire year once you're done, and you'll get a different pattern based on your colors and, of course, your color choices. Now, speaking of color choices, okay, so I've seen a bunch of different things on this. Some people have done this more monochromatic. Some people are trying to use the Roy G. Biv, which makes sense. Where are you going to find something for weather? So, Matt, we have to pull up the weather.gov website once again. We'll pull that up, and then I'm going to show you how I came up with the colors, because from a weather standpoint versus an art standpoint, could be a little bit different. So with weather, we're looking at the Roy G. Biv scale. So here, we're not doing the past weather. We're going under forecast maps. Thank you. And once you see that map on your right. So it shows a scale from 80 degree plus to minus 20. So you can see that those colors there in the 20s, they start out light blue, then they go dark blue, then they go to that violet color, and then they change over to pinks. Your mid-range colors, your 40s, 50s, and even early 60s, you're going to be talking about lots of different shades of greens and yellows. And then as you get above 70, you're going to be looking at your oranges and then into your reds. And that was kind of the guideline that I used for this. And if you want to get an idea of how this may turn out for you, then a lot of folks like to do this nowadays, where you kind of plot it out yourself. So I kind of tried this, and I was trying different patterns at the time in addition to colors, and I was just trying to see like roughly what this is. So this is where your kids can come in handy. You can give them all the weather information you want, and you say, plot this out for me just so I can see the colors. So you get a pack of colored pencils or crayons, and you have them go through and try to figure out exactly which ones they're going to do. And so this can get kind of fun for the kids as they're trying to make their way through this. So that is definitely something that kids can help out on. And then the other thing is then you can also, this is also on that Canuck web page, then you write down your swatch, you write down your temperature range, and then you put your fabric name. And I, like I said, put the initials of where I got it from, because I had to go to multiple locations to find the fabric. So once you get your fabric, then, you know, you in case you don't get enough of it or you got too much, you want to be able to maybe even make more than one quilt. So if you do that, you definitely want to buy extra. But at the smaller end, I mean, if you just have scraps laying around, you can use that even for your early for like your more extremes, should we say. Then the other thing I also added was, I also added in confetti, because I used this, because this was a gift. I used these for the birthday. So I did a double, as you can see here, I did it on both the high and the low to show that that's where the birthday is. So I've got some pictures here to show you, and this was kind of like me putting it together. Here's my fabric sheet here that I came out with my range. So I did like 10 to 14 degrees, 15 to 19. I found 5 degrees actually works quite well. So let's go to the next one. And here's my color swatches. And I just have a box. I even brought my box with, but I do have this giant boot box here of all my fabric swatches. And so if I decide to do this again, I'm ready for it. And then I laid out my colors. And let's go to the next one. And then for this particular pattern, each square was 2 by 2 inches. And then I laid them all out. And as you can see, the numbers on the sides tells me how many I did of each one. Keep going. And then I made my temperature scale. It actually really helps when you're trying to put this together to visually see it in case you mess up and you're like, oh, is that one supposed to go this way or that way when you're putting together the blocks? So it was nice to have that separately. Okay, let's go on. And then this was the start of the blocks. So the block, I did this particular one, I did like 4 days in a row at a time. I also found that as I did the second quilt, I used my 6 by 24 inch ruler, and then I was able to actually lay out 10 days in a row. So then it was a lot faster to sew it together. So this one, I started by just with a box and doing 4 days in a row. Okay, next one. Okay, so the top one here is the finished block at the start of January, and then underneath were the next 4 days. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have 8 days that are together at the top, and then this would be like January 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th that were going to be added. Okay, next one. And I laid it all out on my floor. I would try to do about half a month at a time, and I just started sewing. You have to keep this organized. Next one. And here's more looking at how I labeled everything, how I had it all. I just did it on my basement floor, so it wasn't anything pretty, because you need a lot of space to put this one together. Okay. And there's another look, and you can see there I had the record highs and the record lows. I just used like little 1-inch squares that I put in for the corners. Okay. And here is a finished month. So this is January for 1 month. You can see that there's a record high in this particular one. And like I said, if there's something with a little blue and a corner with the polka dots, that would be a record low. Okay, next one. Okay, here we have 4 months. Or I should say 3.5 months that are done. And on this particular picture, if you look closely, all the ones that aren't sewn together, that is my 6 by 24 inch ruler that I used, where I started actually being a little bit more proficient at putting this together. And so basically you just start doing month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. So every set of the first 2 colors is the first day of the month. So when you're looking at the temperature quilt, here, this is my second one. So this is January 1st. Then when we go down to the next block, this is February 1st, March 1st, and so on and so forth. And then it goes all the way across. So every single day is accounted for. Okay, next we've got a couple more pictures here. So there's the close-up of the birthday and also of the record lows. Go to the next one. And there's 3 months. And here is, this wasn't quilted yet, but I wanted to see what the difference was between black and white. So here's a white background, and then here's the black background. I ended up using the black. So that's what I ended up doing. And then I took it when I was done to a quilter who quilted it for me, and then I just bound it myself. So hopefully you learned something on this. Again, this could be kind of fun for your kids to do as a coloring project, or if you're looking for weather information, hopefully you learned something on how to find it. I hope you enjoyed this segment. I've been looking forward to doing this one for quite a while. Until next time, have a great day.